With the comforts and commodities of modern day, living a reclusive existence shut away from society has not only become easy but also fairly common. Living away from the hustle and bustle of society has been romanticized when those who choose to show themselves away from society are creative people. But sometimes isolation can result in very dark, disturbing events. This is the true story of the Yasutake family. Okay, Didi. So what we'll do today is I'll narrate the entire story to you because this is a story where we will need a lot of your psychological input. So I'll tell you the story and then you explain to all of us why is it that some people are shut-ins.
I would love to do.
So Didi, very little is known about the Yasutake family. But here is the gist of all that we know. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, there was a woman in her 20s and her name was Michiko Yasutake. She gives birth to 3 children. The eldest daughter is called Yoshika. Her second daughter and middle child is called Lina. Her second daughter and middle child is called Rina. And her youngest brother, the youngest child of the family, is a boy called Takahiro. Now, Michiko was married to a man, of course, but we don't know that person's name. So for now, we'll just call him an unidentified Japanese husband. Sadly, this relationship between Michiko and her husband did not last. And all we know is that Michiko got divorced from her husband a little bit later, still in the 1970s. But soon thereafter, she ended up marrying a British man and moving to the UK. And this is still in the early 1970s when her children were still very young. For a time, Yasutake mother, so that woman's name is Michiko, Michiko the mother and all 3 children adopted this man's family name which was Calendine. The Yasutakes came from a family of renowned Buddhist academic achievers and were as such very wealthy. Therefore, they were self-reliant and did not work in the UK at all. The 3 children were privately educated at some very prestigious schools. Although we do not know much about the mother Michiko or the elder sister Yoshika or the younger brother Takahiro, at least we know a little bit more about Rina, the middle child. So, the middle child Rina was said to be a very bright student in the early 1980s. She studied at a well-renowned institution called the Queen's Mary School, which was a boarding school for girls near the town of Thirsk. According to her former classmate, a woman called Sarah Matthews, Rina boarded with her in the same room, and she basically said that Rina was extremely hardworking and was very bright. Not only this, Rina was an amazing artist and was a lovely person. Though she was always very quiet and studious, but she had a great sense of humor. Sarah also recalls that Rina participated in all aspects of life and achieved very high grades. Rina won a scholarship in 1986 to the 6th form.
Before we move on, Kay, can you explain what 6th form means?
Yeah. Okay, so the 6th form are basically the last 2 years of high school. What we call grade 11th and 12th is what in England they call it the 6th form. In America it's called high school. So she won this scholarship and she won the scholarship to a place called Wickham Academy School where she studied history and Latin and Greek among other subjects of humanities. Because of her amazing grades, she even secured admission to University of Cambridge where she studied classics and specialized in linguistics. Even at Cambridge University, Rina was known to be a diligent student who was extremely friendly and funny, and she was apparently an exceptional artist as well. She was so good that her paintings were published in the school magazine, and she even sold a few of these paintings despite the fact that she did not major in this subject. After graduating from Cambridge with top grades, Rina didn't seek employment and instead returned to her family home in Nunnington, a village which is in the North Yorkshire area of the UK. The town where her family was living at this point looked like an idyllic painting. Her elder sister Yoshika, who was also a gifted student and a pianist, had already graduated from Royal College of Music in London, and even she had returned back to the family home. And exactly the same thing was done by the younger brother Takahiro. He returned home after studying at Ampleforth College, which is a private boarding school for boys. Rina had many friends at boarding school and had quite a lot of friends at university, and she used to be a popular person who was very active in school activities. But after returning to her family home, she cut off contact with her friends for unknown reasons, and they wouldn't hear much from her after she completed her graduation. As a matter of fact, we don't know anything about these three siblings after they finished their respective education from university. The family had already removed itself from society. However, things took a turn in 1998 when Michiko split up with her British husband. Again, I'm not familiar with that man's name, so I cannot tell you his name. And after separating from him, they moved to a terrace cottage on Bond Gate in the picturesque town of Hemsley. At this point, Michiko, the mother, was living with the three grown-up children. Here, the family became even more reclusive, remaining isolated from world. They did not own a television, they did not own a computer, they did not even own a radio, and chose not to communicate with the world outside. If they had to communicate, they actually wrote letters, and it goes without saying that they did not own a telephone either. Michiko, the mother, and Rina, the middle daughter, mostly stayed inside the cottage. The family was so withdrawn that even the neighbors had no idea that so many people lived in the house. They only thought that Yoshiko, the eldest sister, and Takahiro, the youngest brother, were the only two people living in the house because these two would occasionally step out of the home. Neighbors didn't even know that these two are siblings. They were under the impression that these two were a married couple. Yoshika, the eldest sister, and Takahiro, the youngest brother, were sometimes seen at local shops where they were going around their business. According to the shopkeepers, the siblings rarely spoke, always avoided eye contact, and always kept to themselves. The owner of the store where the family did their weekly shopping said that the two members of the family used this place to buy food, which they would pre-order in writing and then simply come and collect it. The shopkeepers first assumed that these two were married just like the rest of the town, and it appears that when the brother and sister would speak amongst themselves, they would always speak very little and always spoke to each other in Japanese. But the shopkeeper recalls that these people were pleasant enough but always quiet and reserved. In the early 2010s, however, things would take a turn and for the family, and Rina, the middle daughter, who by this time was in her 40s, began to act strangely. It seems that things really started to spiral out of control for her around this time, and she began suffering from several mood swings, and she had some extreme behavioral issues, because of which she had to seek medical treatment. In 2013, she was given counseling by her general practitioner.
Okay, it is kind of strange that she was given counseling by her general practitioner and not by a mental health specialist.
So, I think my understanding of the UK health system, their NHS, is that no matter what happens, you're initially seen by the general practitioner. And I'm pretty sure that the general practitioner must have advised the family to go look for a mental health specialist. But let me continue with the story. The general practitioner knew that Rina had had an aggressive episode and she had acted violently against her family. And these were the only people that she was close to at this point. Beyond this point, sadly, nothing would be heard about Rina for another 5 years. On 25th of September of 2018, the older sister Yoshika and the younger brother Takahiro visited their local chemist to buy bottles of surgical spirit.
Are you going to explain to us what is surgical spirit?
Yeah. So just give me a second. So a surgical spirit is basically a kind of disinfectant which is used to clean hands and surfaces, but this is of far more intense quality than what we usually use. Remember when during COVID we were all constantly rubbing disinfectant on our hands? This is basically more potent than that. The siblings had been repeatedly buying bottles of surgical spirits over a period of days, which aroused suspicion for the pharmacist. The concerned pharmacist then saw Rina's name was written on a pink folder which Takahiro was carrying with him. So the pharmacist saw this as an opportunity to learn something about the person that they were buying the surgical spirit for, and the pharmacist pointed at Rina's name and said, "Is it for this person?" And Takahiro did not speak, he didn't say anything, he simply nodded in agreement. But this odd behavior was not the only thing that the pharmacist was concerned about. She also noticed something else, and something a little more sinister. The pharmacist could smell a peculiar smell of dead bodies which was emanating from the two siblings. Suspicious, the pharmacist called the local authorities, but she was not the only person to contact the police. Another person who contacted the police was a man named Charles Davidson, who was working on repairing the cottage roof where the family lived. Charles Davidson had also noticed a foul odor emanating from the house, and he also raised alarm with the police. After these two calls reached the authorities, they finally decided to look into the Yasutake family home, and they found something they had never seen before. In one of the bedrooms, laying on a mattress with a duvet all the way to her neck, were the remains of Rina Yasutake. Sadly, she had passed away. While officers remained at the address to question the family, they called the medical professionals to immediately come in and check on the now dead Rina Yasutake. The attending paramedic was a woman called Karen Tomlinson, and Karen is reported to have said that it was clear to her that Rina had been in an advanced state of decomposition. She was actually so decomposed that it was to the point of mummification. The police cordoned off the entire house as the roof of this house was already under maintenance. Now, if you remember, I told you before that they lived in a cottage, so it does sound like they were the only ones living there, but it looked like a cottage, but it was actually an apartment building. It was like basically flats right next to each other. So, of course, the police cordons off this entire area and they start to question the family. Then they removed Lena's body and began their investigation. Once they began their investigation, strange details about the family gradually emerged. While they all spoke fluent English because they had spent a majority of their life in the UK, including the mother, she was exceptionally well spoken, they would mostly speak Japanese to each other. The investigators provided the family with a native Japanese speaker, thinking that this would ease communication. But they were surprised to learn that even the interpreter had some difficulties understanding the Japanese that the three members of the family spoke. The police's understanding is that because of years and years of isolation from society and also years of isolation from the Japanese community, the family had developed their own unique dialect of Japanese. It was in fact so unique and so particular to the four members of the family, which were now three because Rina had already passed away, that even the professional interpreter and a fellow Japanese person could not comprehend what these three people were speaking. However, whatever little the family members did say was both shocking and confusing because they believed that Rina was very much alive and did not accept the fact that she was dead. The oldest sister Yoshika said, and I quote, "She was still breathing, her body was warm, and she had a pulse," unquote. But things get even stranger when you catch a glimpse into the minds of the family. Yoshika, the elder sister, said that Reina did not say much, so we encouraged her to eat and drink more. She also said, quote, "It looked like Rina was nourished by eating her soul," unquote. Further in the same interview, she also said, quote, "I don't know how to explain, even though she was not eating, she was nourished with spiritual food," unquote. All this was revealed to the police by the family in monosyllabic utterances once they were arrested. And why were they arrested? Because it was believed that they had concealed a dead person in their house and they were denying a dead person a proper burial. So those were the charges against this family. Craig Hassel, who was the king's counsel, who represented family as their lawyer, asked the inspector Nicola Holden during her testimony when the state was deciding if the family should be taken to the court or not. So he was questioning Nicola Holden, who was the police detective, if the Yasutake family was utterly convinced Reina was still alive when the emergency services had arrived. To which the inspector Nicola Holden said that not only were they of the belief that Rina Yoshitake was alive at the point when the emergency services had arrived, but the family was actually under the impression, the same impression for many months to come. So they just could not believe that Rina had passed away. According to the family, Rina had started to experience mental and emotional problems in early 2018, and in April of 2018, when the family heard back from that Rina's father, according to the family, Rina started to experience mental and emotional problems in early 2018, and in April 2018, after her father back in Japan passed away, Rina stopped eating altogether. Her family cared for her and tried to help her consume food, but Rina didn't take any food at all. Out of fear, the family did not take Rina to the hospital. Why? Because they believed that something could happen to Rina in the outside world. Rina grew weaker and weaker because she refused to eat, and slowly over time she began moving less and less, because of which she became bedbound. And all this is according to a diary which was found by the investigators at the cottage where the family, Yasutake family, was living. And then, according to the same diary, Reina stopped responding altogether on 18th of August of 2018. This was roughly 6 weeks before her body was discovered. As I already said, if you're wondering how we know any of these details at all, it's because there was a diary which was found in the Yasutake home. However, we don't know for sure who wrote this diary, whether all three of them wrote it or all four of them maybe at some point. But all we know is that this diary was written in Japanese. At some point, the siblings began to buy surgical spirit from the local chemist, as I previously mentioned in the story. And they were basically doing that because they wanted to cleanse her body. They wanted to keep her as clean as possible. However, we're not very sure as to who applied this spirit to her body. Was it Yoshitake, or was it Takahiro? Was it the mother Michiko, or was it Rina herself? We don't know anything. The post-mortem examination was conducted, and because the cause of death could not be established, the coroner did say that there were no signs of injuries, there was no sign of any disease, there was no sign of any drug in her body. The police could not find anything which could point towards foul play. It was also revealed in the medical report by the coroner that Reina stood 4'11", and around the time of her death, they could basically deduce that she weighed around 40 kilos. She was deeply malnourished, but it did not seem like anybody had injured her or put her under distress. Due to the circumstances in which the body was found, the Yasutake family was accused of preventing a lawful burial. Now, this might not seem like a very big offense, but it's actually a very severe offense under the British law. This is a common law offense which attracts the penalty, which can be extremely high as life imprisonment. However, the more the authorities interviewed the family, the more they realized that something wasn't quite right. Years of isolation had clearly affected them in more ways than one. The family had several communication difficulties. The prosecution was halted outright when it was discovered that the family members all suffered from a very rare, unspecified mental disorder. And the prosecutors of the York Crown Court that were pursuing this case then dropped it because they thought that this was not in public interest. At the inquest, Deputy Inspector Holden said that it was very unusual, and this was of course very tragic and upsetting for the family, but it was not in the public's interest to go against this family. So the case was dismissed when the court was provided no evidence against the family, and the York judge, Sean Morris, granted a request for the case to remain on file under the understanding that the three defendants would accept welfare checks from the police and from social services regularly. The family did not themselves attend this inquest in the court, but they said that they would listen to a recording of it through their lawyer a little bit later. The family still lives in Terrace Cottage, and nothing has been heard about this family ever since. So there's not been any disturbance. There's not been anything else that has happened apparently. Now you must be wondering how people around them reacted when they came to know about Reena. So the town became a little unnerved by the whole situation. They always have kept a distance from this particular family, and of course several people have questions about how this could have happened to Reena. So Didi, I think this is where you come in, because there is of course a sociological aspect to this, and there's also a psychological aspect of it. So what I'll do is I'll quickly give everyone the sociological religious aspect, or a little bit of just a background of this, and then you can jump in and explain to us the psychological part of it. So, as I had mentioned earlier, the Yasutake family came from Buddhist academics, and according to people who had met Reena and friends of hers, especially a woman called Sarah Matthews, who I had mentioned earlier, she said that even when Reena was a child, she would get up at 5 a.m. every single day and do Buddhist prayers in the school library. She also said that Reena was really good at palm reading, and she would read people's palms and would give people information. So with this little information that we have, we can definitely deduce that this family was a rather religious one, and they were deeply into Japanese Buddhism. There is something known as Soku Shimbotsu in Japan. This is a term which refers to a practice of Buddhist monks observing asceticism to the point of death, and even entering mummification while they are still alive. In other words, these monks practically stop eating and meditate until they pass away. Some followers of this practice even believe that the people who take part in Shoku Shimbotsu are not dead really, but they're in a very deep state of meditation in which they have abandoned their physical bodies. So from all this, one can even deduce that maybe this is what Reena was doing. I mean, of course, I'm not sure, I'm just speculating. Maybe the family so deeply believed in this practice that they were convinced that Reena was indeed eating her soul, and she was deeply into meditation and spirituality. Maybe that's what they believe. However, through this entire inquiry, the authorities did not state which particular mental disorder they believe this family was suffering from. So we're going to start our speculation. So Didi, if you could explain to us why this would happen to this family. Why would they go through something like this?
Okay, see, the influence on multiple people like this could be something genetic, or it is the extreme isolation that forces them into a particular state of mental disorder, or it is a shared psychotic disorder that this family had unfaced. In psychology, there is a term, folie à deux. Now, what does this term mean? So this is simultaneous occurrence of symptoms of a mental disorder. It could be delusions in two people who are closely related as siblings, husband and wife, brother, sister, sisters, people living basically under one roof.
So, okay, Didi, I think I kind of get it. So, just as an example, would it be something like, let's say that I meet you and 3 other people every single day. We all live under the same roof, and you all keep telling me that the earth is flat. So, if everyone that I'm surrounded by in my immediate family believes that the earth is flat, and I do not go out in the world, I simply just meet the 4 of you, we will all certainly start believing, and we will sync our thought process. Almost like women sync up their periods, we would all sort of sync our thought process. So that's what folie à deux is?
Yes, you're right.
So Didi, there is something really interesting that you and I are aware of, but other people might not be aware of it. So I think this would be a good discussion to have. It might be a bit of a digression, but this is related to a Japanese family in the UK. But there is actually a phenomena in Japan which is called a phenomena called hikikimori. So you know a lot about this because you've done this kind of counseling before. So if you could explain to the audience what is hikikimori.
Okay, so as you have already mentioned, hikikomori is a Japanese term that basically translates into pulling inward or being confined. Now, this is actually what a person does to themselves. I'll give you a very simple example. A child goes to a school every single day, same classroom, same teachers, but one day suddenly comes home and decides to never leave the room. Now, this phenomena can be described as a phenomena only if the child or an adult, young adult, decides not to leave their house for or room for at least 6 months. Now we have various reasons for it, and it in Japan this condition is considered both a social and psychological issue, and it is actually recognized by the government and mental health organ. So of course this case is related to Japan, and we must discuss, you know uh, around the world this phenomena exists. We, like in India, we don't give it a name. Have you heard of social recluses or hermits?
Yeah, I mean, of course, this became quite a problem all over the world during COVID because people were forced to, stay indoors, and then after that, some people got so used to it that they preferred not to stay with other members at all, and they completely withdraw from society.
Absolutely. So similarly, in South Korea, they have a different term that is Honjong, which literally means alone tribe. So it has everything has to got to do with being alone. Like in China, they have homeboy, homegirl. Again, being a homebody.
Right, but then, I mean, those are social problems in so many countries around the world, and thanks to COVID, it basically became a global or a universal phenomena. But here, the Japanese family that we're talking about, the Yasutake family, they were basically what you're telling me is these people shared a common delusion, folly or do. However, it is a common phenomena when one person withdraws, that person is called hikikimori, or that person is called a homeboy or a homegirl. So that's where these things are set apart.
Okay, again, let's be very clear. I'm not diagnosing anyone in this case, just simply speculating what would be happening with the individuals in this family. That is Yasutake family. Now, there is this theory known as family systems theory. So, this particular theory suggests that families operate as emotional units. We all have felt this at some point of our lives. And their behavior can be shaped by dynamics within the family. A highly cohesive family might develop insular tendencies to maintain harmony, or they want to shield themselves from perceived external threats. Now, in the case of Yasutake family, there can be several reasons for their isolation. One could be overdependence on internal family relationships, basically for emotional support. Second could be fear of external influences, disrupting their family's tightly knit dynamic. So they didn't want anybody to basically, be a part or disrupt their family system.
I mean, it makes perfect sense because um, uh, if you do remember, they were this Japanese family that had moved into the UK in the 1970s, and they did come from a scholarly sort of Buddhist background. So they might have perceived that if the children were to go out in the world, and I'm calling them children, but they're whole sort of fully developed human beings. They were all adults, but um, the point being that had they been exposed to the outside world, it would have possibly, I'm not sure if I should use this word, it might have possibly corrupted or corroded their way of thinking, their way of doing things. So I think you're right.
No, yeah, I agree, and you have used the right word. It might have corrupted. That could be their mother's fear. Now, moving on, there is another theory that is known as cognitive dissonance theory. Now, according to this theory, individuals experience discomfort when their actions conflict with their beliefs. High achieving families might perceive societal norms or behaviors as inconsistent with their values or lifestyle. Now, would you like to say something about children who are, high achievers?
Yeah, I mean, uh, of course, this doesn't happen with everyone who's a high achieving family, but if you remember, Rina was supposed to be like this gifted person, Rina Yasutake. Then, do you remember her elder sister was a piano prodigy, right? So, even Takahiro himself is supposed to be this extremely gifted individual. So all three of them did study in boarding schools, sort of highly sort of elite academies. So of course this would already bring a sense of isolation. They would probably, I'm not saying that they thought that they were better than others, but they definitely knew that they're different from others. So their desires did not align with the environment where they were, because uh, you're right. I mean, it's not like they were living in London or anything in one of those big places. They were living in sort of like these bucolic rural background. It was basically they were living in these kind of little villages. So they did not go out of their way to even look for people who might have been as high achieving as them. Okay, so Didi, tell us why. What could be the other reasons why somebody would isolate themselves as much as the Yasutake family did?
There is something known as existential isolation, and this is a sense of separation from others due to unique life experiences, as we were just discussing. So, these high achievers might feel misunderstood or unable to relate to others who haven't had similar accomplishments.
Right, you're right. I mean, we don't find too many people around us who are excellent at piano, and everyone, I mean, everyone in the family is competing to be all prodigies. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, of course, there is this sort of dissonance that these people would have. Once they would move out of the family, they would know that, life is not like life is within their family.
See, feeling different or alienated because of their high level of success is, of course, one possibility, and belief that others cannot understand them, their struggles, or their achievements is another reason.
Right, and you don't mean the word struggle in terms of economic struggle, because we do know that this family has never nobody in the family has ever had a job since the 1970s. So in that sense, they did have sort of a cushy lifestyle, but when the police did get into their home, it was not like they had an extravagant life. They were actually living quite simply. So I understand what you mean by struggles, and people like that can even struggle within their own minds.
And then there is something related to culture or societal expectations. So, cultural factors may play a very important role in isolation, particularly if the family adheres to traditions that prioritize exclusivity or separation from external influences.
Right. I mean, yeah, again, and this was a Japanese family living in rural UK. So they were quite distinct. Their lifestyle is distinct from the prevalent cultural norms, where most of the people, especially in those rural areas of the UK, would predominantly be Protestant. And this is clearly a Buddhist Japanese family, although everybody spoke English like natives, but even then, one can understand sort of this cultural norm of exclusivity. We don't definitely mean this in terms of elitism, but we definitely mean this in terms of their exclusivity. So they would have thought that. So what you're trying to say, Didi, is that they would have thought that maintaining this distinct social identity would probably be better for their family unit.
Absolutely. See, being Japanese, Buddhist Japanese, Buddhist Japanese plus high achieving family. So, of course, it is, I mean, they must have felt different. And as we are discussing, these are the reasons for isolation in this family.
Right. Okay. So I think that's it for our behavioral and our criminological analysis with this case. Until we see you the next time with another episode, stay collectively vigilant. However, this has been a really interesting episode, and we have learned about this really interesting social phenomena. Let us know what you think about it. Although this is not really an episode where a crime was committed or somebody was murdered, however, there are legal implications of this, there are psychological implications of this. So let us know what you thought, and until we meet you the next time, stay collectively vigilant.